It's that loud, huh?
It's just wind.
Yeah.
Not the motorcycle, just the wind. And I get like headaches and just noises, constant noises, like when you're at restaurants.
Yeah.
Like Chipotle or anything that has that loud, constant, redundant, repetitive noise. Just it does something to me. Like makes me very agitated.
Yeah.
And hurts my ears.
Do you have tinnitus?
I don't know.
Don't know. It's like that constant ringing in your ears.
I don't have constant, but that when I'm in crowds like that, that's almost like what it is. It's like, the longer it goes. I actually had, when we were at Jeff Ruby's one time, they put us outside in this little area, vestibule, and that's what I was doing. And it was so bad. I was like, hey, can we move?
Dude, I noticed it's only developed over the last, I don't know, year.
I have super sensitive hearing too.
Do you? Spider Jamie?
Like I can hear a pacemaker.
Oh, whatever. No, you can't.
No, swear to God. I can hear pacemakers.
Okay, so what do you hear when you're around my dad?
Zappers.
I'm never going to let you live this down because my dad has a pacemaker. So every time you get around dad, I'm going to ask you how he's doing.
Yeah, it's the click that I was at a customer's house knocking on their door, and I asked him, I was like, do you have one of those bug zapper things? He's just like, no. He's like, you hear my pacemaker. It's like a click and a whine, right?
Well, it's a 1972 model pacemaker. Yeah.
I was like, yeah.
It's got an analog relay in it.
Apparently his daughter can hear it too. And I'm like, oh my God, I hope I never need a pacemaker at all. But two TVs, the old two TVs.
Oh yeah. I could hear those. But I mean, I was really young the last time I heard a two TV.
All the time when I go into people's houses, I have two TVs still. And they got the black screen on, but it's on. I was like, did you know your TV's on? They're like, no, it's off. And I was like, no, it's
you think
on.
it is.
Yeah. So I go over and I push the button and it turns off. It's like, how did you know that was on? I was like, I can hear it. It's hurting my ears.
Thank God that you turned that. Thank God you turned that off. I mean, that TV's so old. I just don't know how long it's going to last.
Fluorescent lights, that hurts my ears.
Yeah, I can hear those too.
That buzzing, that beeping, the sound on those gateways.
They tell it. Well, it's because of those. Those little the little power converter chips, the step down converters and the boost converters. They tend to hiss, or if they're really crappy.
Makes an inverter compressor that we were in training, and the thing was running, and I couldn't stand it. Like it was just, I could hear it ramping up and down. And it was just like this super high pitched dog whistle sound. Like I'm like, please make it stop. Please make it stop.
It sounds like you never grew into your adult hearing frequency, because after you get past a certain age, you're not supposed to be able to hear those super high frequencies anymore. Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah, it sucks. I'm not an adult.
I'm going to be a big boy.
You can't make me.
I'm going to be a big boy
big.
Someday.
Hold on. Oh, we were recording?
Welcome to the Rhythm Pyro Podcast. Where Rosie, AJ, and Jamie ignite your passion for pyro musical show design while testing the very limits of your capacity for stupid.
And that's a lie. Only Bo and Jamie are going to test your capacity for stupid this week. Welcome to the Rhythm Pyro Podcast. I'm Bo, and that's Jamie.
Hey.
And AJ's sick as a dog. Huh? What?
I didn't hear what you said.
Which part?
Funny guy. Ba-da-bum.
We're hobbyists and semi-professional pyro show designers. We love pyro musicals. This podcast is a place. It's amazing. AJ's not even here to. Yeah, apparently I need that cue. I need the audible cue of AJ just laughing like a hyena at you. I'm like, okay, I got it. I missed it. I'll move on. This is a part where
you have that on the soundboard. AJ's laugh.
I don't actually. I don't.
I'm sure you can find a donkey on there somewhere.
This podcast is a place where we can talk shop, fireworks, art, share tips, tricks, news, and design insights with you. Big ups to all the Patreon supporters, patreon.com/Rhythm Pyro. We had a really good response rate to the casting call for this month's Shit Show Roundtable.
Oh boy.
Yeah, quite a few actually. And, let's see, we record today's Tuesday. And this will be out on Friday, but sometime in between right now and when you're here listening to this on Friday, we will have reached out to the people that we would like to talk to for next week's Shit Show Roundtable episode.
But that doesn't mean we don't want to talk to the other
That's right. That doesn't mean that we don't want to talk to the rest of you.
We just had to select two.
We just, we got to select two. And you know what I realized too is I put on there that it was first come, first serve. And Jessica was the first one to respond. She's like, man, I am ready for my redo. Like you guys, like this
She's ready for redemption.
I'm ready for redemption. We gotta do this, dude. Don't leave me hanging. So I feel bad if I don't ask her to be on it.
Yeah. First come, first serve.
Yeah. If it's first come, first serve, she was the first one in. That's going to air next Friday, the 29th. So happy Thanksgiving to you.
What are we going to do when we have two people that want to be on? One's from the West Coast and one's from Europe.
It's going to be Europe? Oh, God. I mean, if we had somebody from outside.
How are we going to coordinate those time zones between the East Coast, West Coast?
That's a level of discomfort that I would be willing to experience just to say that we talked to somebody from Europe. I think that'd be great. Dude, speaking of that, I was going through the demographics of all of the people that were listening to the show. If I rewind a year, because I remember looking at that screen, it's probably been a year since I actually looked at it, but it tells you where all your listeners are from around the world. Mm-hmm. And a year ago, when I looked at it, we had all of our core listeners are obviously in the United States. And then we had like a spattering in Canada, Mexico. And then we had like one to three people in India. And that was it at the end of last year. When I looked at the demographic map 2 days ago, we had like 30 or 40 people listening from Australia. We had another 10 or 15 people listening in Japan, a handful in China, like so just some really, really cool places, South Africa.
Man.
So it made me feel pretty good. I hope you guys feel pretty good.
Is it translated at all or?
Absolutely not. It's like this is the worst presentation.
Makes just the same amount of sense in a foreign language as it does,
in
English.
Our language. Yeah, exactly. We sound just as stupid in a foreign language as we do in our native language. Go join the Discord server. It's so much fun. The links for that are in the description. Today, we are going to talk about SMPTE Timecode. And
this is that?
Yeah, exactly. SMPTE. Can you use it in a sentence, please?
I can't spell it the right way. Apparently it's in all caps because it's important.
Yeah, right. It's because it's yelling. It's a talent crier, right? Spell that, please. SMPTE. SIMPE. Fail.
You're gonna have to learn me because I've never understood it because I never had it. And I'm like,
I was banking on AJ to be here for this one, so I had somebody to bounce some stuff off of. But I mean, this is good too because obviously, if you have any questions that just come up natively, being somebody who's not used it before, go ahead and ask, and I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability.
Yeah, if we don't answer the viewers' questions, we can just leave AJ's phone number on this episode.
Yeah, for sure.
You motherfuckers.
We got a bunch of voicemails to go over later too, so that'll kind of help here in AJ's sicky absence. We hope you feel better, buddy.
Yeah.
So SMPTE Timecode, it's the standardized system developed by no one that we know from the Society of Motion Pictures and Television Engineers for precisely synchronizing audio, video, and other time-based media. And that other time-based media is kind of where we fall as pyros. So it provides a method for labeling each frame of media with a unique timestamp.
What?
Mm-hmm. It's wonderful for tasks like editing and synchronization and playback in media production. And of course, in pyro and live entertainment and special effects applications, we use SMPTE Timecode to sync our equipment up. So firing systems, lighting consoles, and the list is quite long and distinguished.
What does SMPTE mean?
It's an acronym for the group that developed it. So the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers.
Okay. That's why it's all
See, I slipped that one right by you at the beginning.
Don't you know? I missed it.
We'll get into the weeds here, and we're kind of going to attack it from a pyro sense. So if you kind of break it down into segments, you've got track formatting, your signal chain integrity, and then your system prep. Formatting a track for SMPTE, once you have your music track, depending on how you want to run your output, you can run a traditional stereo output. And I think that's typically how it's done in pyro applications, or at least that's how we've grown used to doing it, because we can output the file on just about any standardized system that allows you a 2-channel stereo output left and right. So formatting that track it's relatively simple, dropping it into an audio editor of your choice. So the SMPTE timecode would obviously be on one channel. So it's panned hard right or hard left, depending on whatever, like it's your choice. Like if you go out and look at, say, Cobra's overview, I think they suggest putting it on the right channel. But again, it doesn't so much matter so long as you're routing the audio where it needs to go.
So when you're creating your soundtrack, that's when you create the SMPTE version of it. Is that what I'm understanding? Before you export.
Yeah. Before your first step is creating your creative soundtrack.
Right. The normal thing that anybody normally versus audio box or SMPTE, correct?
Correct. Yeah. You gather all of your soundtracks up, you create your soundtrack, and then you export that soundtrack without SMPTE. Now,
okay.
Could you do them together? Absolutely. I mean, I'll do that stuff all the time, but I mean, it's good to compartmentalize. And if you're looking at things top down, step 1, create your track. Step 2 is take your finished track while it's in one track format and then import it into a new session, and then use this new session to create your control file. And your control file is going to be a combination of your audio track and your SMPTE timecode.
You're suggesting create your soundtrack, cut it down the way you want it, export it into a single soundtrack, and then import it to start working on the SMPTE version?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Now, you can use SMPTE timecode generators. There's different types of timecode. So long as whatever system you're using to listen to the timecode can read a specific type of timecode, linear timecode, certain frame rates, etc., then you're fine at that point. Cobra is pretty compatible, and I'm just going to speak in terms of what we use, but Cobra accepts a few different frame rates, and they actually provide you with a printed SMPTE timecode file that you can download. It's a 90-minute file, and you can import that into your session and use that to formulate your panned track. So at that point, it's 2 tracks, same timeline. You're going to take one, pan it hard left, say that's your music track, and then you're going to take the other and pan it hard right. You got to make sure that you have 100% pans on those tracks before you set your ins and out points to export your track.
And bringing us down to non-music people, that would be the left channel versus the right channel when you see pan left and pan right?
Yep. What you're essentially doing is you're creating a traditional stereo track. If you drop any stereo track into Audacity or into Reaper or Cubase or Pro Tools, any of these other digital audio workstations, and you actually have a look at the waveform, you will see 2 independent separate channels. That's because you have audio information being output in the stereo spectrum. all modern music is output on the stereo spectrum, because engineers are using that audio landscape to try to paint a bigger picture, because, panning can do that. But what you're doing in a live environment, when you play this on show day, is a lot of times that stereo spectrum doesn't so much matter as much, because it's not super audible on the fields and on the systems that we're playing them on. So what winds up happening is a lot of times we'll wind up bouncing to joint stereo files, which is just a combination of taking both. If you're talking in just traditional music sense, like if we're forgetting about the SMPTE piece of it for a second, a joint stereo file is a mixture of your left and right channels that essentially contain the same information. You're not creating a mono file, but you're creating a joint stereo file where your left and right channels contain a lot of the same information without phasing. But what that does is that it creates something that's more down the middle than it is left and right, but it still contains left and right information. When you introduce SMPTE into a stereo format, when you drag these files into your digital audio workstation, you first want to take your old stereo file, which was your music track, and you want to make it a mono file. So every digital audio workstation has a way of doing this, but you want to make sure that you're not taking a stereo file and then putting it on a track and then panning it hard left, because all you're going to get on that track is everything that exists in the original stereo spectrum of that stereo file. So it has to be mixed.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it has to be mixed down to a mono file before you can execute SMPTE along with it, if this is the method that you choose.
Would that be as simple as when you exported your song that you were completed as a mono file versus stereo or joint?
100%.
And then that way it's already mono when you pull it in to start working with SMPTE?
Yes, sir. Yep.
But you're saying there's, even at that point of you've imported a stereo file, you can change that in your audio interface to mono other ways as well?
Yeah, there's other ways to do it. But now what you just said is probably the path. Yeah, it's the simplest and the path of least resistance.
That is the way I'm doing it.
Yep. Yeah. So, because that compartmentalization, right? And like going from step one to step infinity, if you creatively make your track and it is the way that you want it, and it's your stereo track, when you go to export it, if you export the thing to a mono file to begin with, then you do that knowing that you need it to be a mono file, because it needs to be a mono file if you're going to then put it back into a session where you need independent left and right channels and separation between the music and the SMPTE, but you want all of the musical information.
Right.
Because you won't get it if you import a stereo file into a session with a SMPTE timecode, and then you just pan it hard left without first bouncing it or converting it to a mono file. All you're going to get is everything that existed
in the left channel or the right
in the
channel.
left channel to begin with. Yep.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
Yep. So once you have your SMPTE timecode and your mono file, and you've got them hard panned left and right, then you set your ins and out points and export. What I would recommend for users that aren't used to SMPTE timecode to begin with is, instead of going out and using generators, find out what your firing system accepts. And then if they have a pre-baked file that you can download and use, awesome. Use it. It'll save you some trouble. Besides that, they've done all the testing on that file and they know that it's good. If not, then you can use timecode generators. They're all over the web. Chances are your DAW probably has one too. I don't know if Audacity has one. Reaper has a linear timecode generator, and just about every other higher end DAW has them as well.
But Cobra has one, is that correct?
Yeah, Cobra's got that 90-minute file that they provide. And what the integrity of the file, people have asked, hey, is the MP3 file any different than the WAV file? And, what's the difference? And MP3 files tend to eliminate a lot of the really, really high spectrum frequency response in playback, but it's not nearly as bad as you think, because it's up in the frequency range that we don't typically hear as humans. So it's not that big of a deal.
Some of us.
Yeah, some of us, unless you're Jamie, you can hear pacemakers
That's right.
and TVs and HVAC systems and all kinds of stuff.
I can tell when you're lying to me, your heart slows down. So what if your song is 91 minutes long? And you have a 90-minute
well, if it's you got a 91-minute track and you get the budget for a 91-minute show, then you should probably get a linear time code generator.
If Q counts don't matter, SMPTE time matters.
Yeah. So yeah, little difference between the WAV files and the MP3 files. Export them and use them. They're just fine. They'll happen any way you like it. Now, the way that you line those up is you absolutely need to make sure that your timecode file starts exactly at the point on the timeline in which your audio file starts. There shouldn't be any discernible difference between the two, because if there is, then your firing system, if it's set to receive timecode, and that's when it's going to start playing the script, because that's all the firing system hears. It doesn't hear the music. It knows that it's supposed to start playing your script as soon as it starts receiving timecode. So it would be playing out of sync with the music if those two files aren't starting exactly where they should on the timeline. And a lot of these digital audio workstations have snapping grids, so it makes that piece of it really simple. But a good way to do it is just to drag both of the files straight to the beginning.
And in that scenario, you really don't have to worry about building in silence or anything like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Unless you're running an audio box, right? I've seen guys run firing system setups. Now this is skipping over the signal chain integrity part of it, but yeah, if you're running a system where your firing system is receiving timecode, and we'll just talk in terms of Cobra for a second. If Cobra is receiving a signal from SMPTE timecode, that just means that the remote is now a slave. Its clock is now a slave to the SMPTE timecode. So the SMPTE timecode is being received, and then the remote sends its timing output to all of the modules in the system, of which the audio box is one. So then at that point, it's like you have crosstalk between the systems. You have communication back and forth. It's saying, hey, I'm here and I should be here. I'm here and I should be here, according to what the 18R2 is broadcasting. So if that's the case, what's playing on the audio box would always be subject to the signal that it's receiving, like all of the packet updates that it's receiving over that wireless network. So that was Curtis and I were talking on the Discord last week, because he's got FireTech. I'm not super natively familiar with how that system works, but he was going to run audio off of FireTech's its audio box essentially, and I guess that's a wireless unit from my understanding. But when you have a system like that, you're going to get latency somewhat, and differentiation. How discernible it is, I have no idea. It could be a lot, it could be a little. It just depends on how the firing system communicates with all of its field units and how well it sticks to its ability to keep timecode and then broadcast those updates.
And to be clear and understanding, you don't need an audio box to use SMPTE.
Absolutely not.
Correct.
Yeah, you don't. It just depends.
Okay. It depends on your application, on if you're using multiple sound systems or something like that,
or where you are physically on the field. I mean, part of the beauty of SMPTE timecode is, you can absolutely, and I'm not trying to be confusing with this, but in reality, all you need is something outputting the SMPTE timecode, and then that something plugged into all of the devices that need to hear it, right? Everything else, so long as, if you've got to run a cable, for instance, coming out of an audio interface that's coming out of your computer, and PA system is 10 feet away or 50 feet away, you could run cabling to the PA system, and you have a direct house audio feed that's running off of the same playhead that's also sending timecode out.
But if you got speakers on the opposite side of the lake, You can have an audio
Yes.
box up there and the other speakers on your side of the lake plugged into the SMPTE direct feed, and you'll have both versions without having to hardwire it across the lake.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And that's exactly what we do at the lake. On my side of the lake, I run the entire show from a Reaper session. And on one track, I have my mixed down mono audio file, and then on the panned hard one way. And then on the other track in Reaper, I've got the SMPTE timecode feed that's panned the other way. And then I have an audio interface coming off of the computer that provides me independent outputs that I can run to whatever is needed. So I've got one that will go out and feed the Cobra, the SMPTE timecode. And then I've got another one that goes directly out to our PA on our side at the control center.
And do you put that same file in the audio box?
I will actually create a joint stereo file in the same session.
Gotcha.
That I create the mono file in, because the timing winds up being exactly the same.
Right.
Usually when I'll go in and do a design, I will always design to the finished file in whatever format it's being played in. If I decide to design off of an MP3 file, then I will make sure that I'm designing off of that session's MP3 file.
So to understand exactly, you create your music file, and this is it. You have one that's joint file that you're saving for your audio box, and you create one that's mono, and you send that one back into Reaper or Audacity and add the SMPTE file on that. But you have that original joint file that you can just plug into the audio box.
Yeah, me personally, because Reaper has the ability to change
it in there.
Yeah, to just change it in the session. I usually export my final joint stereo file for the audio box, and then that's what I'm designing off of. That's what goes in the audio boxes, and that's what I'll bring back into Reaper. But what I do in Reaper is an additional step where I'll bounce it down to a mono file. And it's not even actually bouncing it. All it's doing is looking at the file like it's a mono file. So it's not like if I actively bounced it, then it would be inducing those phasing changes that I was talking about. But because it's not doing that, and it's just giving you a representation that it can output locally, I don't even need to worry about that.
Okay. That's the better way to do it in that situation.
Right. Because it
avoid the phasing.
Yeah, it avoids the phasing. It avoids having to rebounce the native audio file. But then, it also creates a scenario where you're not working off of different files, but you can absolutely do it the way that you were talking about before, where you can bounce a joint stereo file and a mono file, as long as you're bouncing to the same finished export render specifications. If you're bouncing to a 320 kilobyte constant bit rate, which you would want to do for Cobra, right? It needs it to be compatible with the audio box, make sure that the same file format that you're bouncing to, that you're going to be running your show off of, is the same thing. It's going to have those same properties if you do bounce it as two totally separate files. Once your track is conditioned and you have your means of output set, it's a matter of determining how you want to output things. And then from there, it's logical thinking as it comes to putting your signal chain together. You can use anything you like, anything that outputs a stereo signal, so long as you can get these two signals into each of the devices that you need to, one, broadcast your house audio, and two, send your SMPTE timecode, then you're gold. There's a lot of things that can go wrong in signal chain integrity. If you're going directly out of your laptop, for example, and you're going directly out of like a headphone jack or something, to somebody that doesn't know any better, you might go out to Amazon and think to yourself, okay, I'll get a splitter. Get yourself a 3.5 millimeter jack splitter that's TRS on one end that goes into the laptop. And then on the other end, you've got two female TRS ports. You think to yourself, okay, cool, I'm split. Well, in reality, those types of adapters are keeping the stereo signal intact in each of the outputs. What you need is something that's physically going to take an axe and split that in half. You want independent separation at all times from your left and right channels. those 3.5 millimeter to RCA jacks are great. Those are really good. You can do 3.5 millimeter to quarters.
Can mess up some speakers with those too.
Yeah, right. One thing I found over the years is you truly don't know when you get to certain situations what kind of inputs they might have for their audio inputs. Like every
That's what I like about my mixer. It has almost every variety.
Yeah.
And still somebody still comes up with, you got one of these?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me pull out my 8-track.
Let me just dive into my box of goodies here. It's a problem if you don't have the cable or the means at all. That's a huge problem. But having to root through, a rat's nest of different cables and adapters and stuff like that's a problem that everybody has no problem taking on. So your signal chain integrity is huge. SMPTE Timecode, thinking backwards and thinking logically from the source is always the mindset to keep yourself in. If you're ever experiencing a situation where you think you got bleed, or
what does that mean?
If you're hearing music in the SMPTE Timecode feed or vice versa, hearing SMPTE Timecode feed in the music, that's not good either way. One that's absolutely detrimental is hearing music on the SMPTE Timecode feed.
And what would cause that?
Typically, it's a panning issue. If the panning's not set right in the source, so if you bounced your file, but you fat fingered the pan, a lot of times you can just flick the mouse wheel, or, you just went to 98%. You didn't go to 100% on panning. That's still a little bit of audio information that was on that other channel that is now in the channel that it shouldn't be in. So that's one way to do it. But other things that I've seen happen as well are you're still outputting a stereo feed at that point. So if anywhere in your chain you insert an adapter that you thought was an adapter that was taking stereo and creating two separate mono signals from it, but it really wasn't. It was taking stereo and then just splitting and creating two additional stereo feeds, you're going to get bleed because it's going to be passing along that stereo feed.
Gotcha.
One of the best things that you can possibly do is, one, your SMPTE timecode. Obviously, you don't want to listen to that for a long time. It's a pain in the ass. It's terrible. Nobody wants to listen to SMPTE timecode. So, but your system wants to. So when you go to do your dry runs, plug it in, do your dry run, and watch your signal integrity. A lot of these systems have a mechanism that tells you what your SMPTE timecode feed integrity is. If you see it dropping, if you see it, bouncing in and out, something's wrong. And Cobra's is pretty simplistic and easy to read. It'll tell you right away signal integrity of the SMPTE timecode feed itself.
That's shown on your laptop.
They've got an indicator for it in control panel, but they also display it on the 7-segment display too.
Fancy.
So it's kind of a segue into my last bullet point for the end of the signal chain, which is the firing system prep. Because you need to know how to prep your firing system in order to receive timecode, because you have to do something to tell it you need to get ready to receive timecode. You're not going to be shooting your script the traditional way. You're typically going to arm and then put it in a state where it's ready to receive timecode, and then it needs to hear it before it's off to the races.
Normally non-SMPTE, you just arm it and press 1 or whatever, but SMPTE would be different.
If you keep the remote in test and you pump timecode into the remote, then it will display a timecode feed. It'll tell you TC, and then it'll give you a number, 0 being the worst and 9 being the best. If you see any kind of degradation in that as the script plays while it's in test mode, all this is doing is telling you the health of the timecode signal. If it's 9s throughout and you never drop, then you're good to go. And then that typically means, 1, your timecode signal is healthy. It hears it. It's also not just that it hears it, it can hear it at an adequate level. I use a interface on my computer. It's a Steinberg UR22. But any of these little 2-channel interfaces, probably even some less than that. Focusrite interfaces, a lot of these things are great for outputting independent left and right signals into whatever you like. But
so I should keep my Focusrite up on the shelf.
Absolutely.
Huh.
Absolutely. You just
I've
take what you need to, you just buy another one.
I've got two.
You do? Perfect. Then you're set.
I was going to sell the other one, but now it sounds like I can use it for SMPTE and I have to unhook this one.
You absolutely can. I've got the one that I got. It's funny because I have two of these UR22s, the MK2s from Steinberg, and the one that I'm actually talking through right now that's processing the mic signal, it's the one that I use on the pyro field because I've got all of this princess tape all over the top of it. That's like instead of the left and right outputs, I have like written on it in Sharpie house audio. I got SMPTE written over another output. And then I have like all of the other little things that I like. So, I've got a little thing on here that says the output, it likes it at 1 o'clock. So I'll turn my output knob on the unit to 1 o'clock because I know that that's a nice, healthy, clean signal coming out of the interface for both audio and SMPTE timecode. And your goal always at the interface should be clean signal. It should never be volume. That's what your preamp is for in the house audio. That's what your PA system's for. That's going to provide you with volume for the house. It's so easy to want to go over to your interface if you don't feel like things are loud enough and crank the output. But the minute that you do that, when you're connected to SMPTE timecode, you can easily distort your output. And if you distort your output and your firing system can no longer discern what the SMPTE timecode is saying, then that's it.
Firing,
you're done. Yeah, it's like your signal is going to degrade and then you lose it completely. The wheels fall off the wagon.
So don't mess with SMPTE after firing show. Got it.
If you got a nice healthy signal, just leave it. Don't touch it. Tell the house audio engineer or whoever's running the PA, but give it some more juice on their end. And if not, if they can't get it there, then chances are the PA system was probably not. Yeah, well, call AJ. It's call Chad because you're going to need a bigger PA system.
This is true. I need a new PA system. You may need a bigger PA system. Yeah. So clean signal integrity is always the biggest thing coming out of your audio source. And to test those things right into your firing system, prep your firing system. I think that's where we left off is firing system prep. For Cobra, it's a matter of inserting a timecode delimiter in your script. So you essentially note in your script that this script is fired with timecode. It's either timecode 1 or timecode 2. And then once that's been called out, then the 18R2 wants to hear timecode before you start the script. So the added step, the physical step, when you boot the remote up is throwing the sucker into ARM and then hitting your go key, which is always the hardest part for people because they're like, oh, wait a minute, hold on a second. You're telling me I got to hit this and then it's not going to go? Correct. It's basically a built-in pause button.
Yes, correct. Because as soon as you hit the button that initiates your script, the remote's going to go into a pause state because it's waiting for timecode.
Spacebar.
And then that's really it.
That's really it.
That's really it. Yeah, easy peasy, right?
Yeah. So here's a question for you. Why SMPTE versus an audio box? What's the benefits to it? Versus an audio box.
I don't think it's really in my personal experience, I don't believe it's really a matter of one working better over the other. I think it really just depends on your application and what you're using it for. I've become accustomed to formatting SMPTE tracks and I just use it because I like to use it. But now there's plenty of applications where you absolutely would need to use SMPTE Timecode. You know, if you're tying multiple systems together, you know, when we did the OPAG Halloween parade last year, this was an interesting one and one that was kind of cool the way it was formatted. I had to run a USB lighting console that was coming off the computer, and I also had to run the firing system. So I used the SMPTE Timecode feed to tie all of that stuff together. But because we were in a parade and was all prox effects, I had to make sure that we had control over safety points in the parade route. There were parts of the parade route that we absolutely could not shoot pyro on. So the idea,
that safety thing again.
Yeah, well, and the SMPTE Timecode kind of, it provided a really interesting solution to this, because the idea originally was I'll create a soundtrack that I know, like I have a bunch of just garbage time baked into the beginning where it was nothing but like you like scary stuff, right? Because it was a Halloween parade, so we did some lighting effects, and then they did some manual firing of pyro, but it wasn't the actual scripted show, right? We had 2 spots along the route that we shot scripted stuff to, and right. I knew I had about 2 minutes between show 1 and show 2. But there was a spot in between where I didn't, you know, I don't want pyro to go. So I have to figure out a way, one, to keep the music going without any kind of like interruption.
Oh.
But between 1 and 2, but the song wasn't that long. I mean, sure, I could have cut it really cleverly to make it sound like it was looping until it got to that point. But what happened if, you know, like the band director falls over and what was supposed to take 2 minutes to get there, it took 5 minutes to get there. Like you're still like, yeah. Your playhead is still going to keep going. So what I did was I created a loop point in a section of the instrumental. So I removed some of the vocals from the tune that we used, and I created this little drum loop and an in and out point. And I essentially, when I was playing Reaper, the playhead is cruising through in Reaper, playing timecode output, as well as, you know, managing all of my lights and stuff, and ultimately the pyro. But once it got to this loop point, I engaged the loop. So what happened was the system is reading the timecode, but it's in a loop. So it hits the end of the loop and then comes back and starts over. The remote was reading that loop point and it was bouncing back and forth, and it just would not come out of the loop. So it provided me a safety loop until we got in position for the second show, and then I can release the loop. And then that way, at no point did the show sound like we stopped anything, right? Because all of my lights were programmed along this timeline to just perform based on where it was in the SMPTE timecode.
And you had more control that way versus creating 2 minutes of black sky with music playing because you didn't know how long it was actually going to be.
Yeah, correct. Because then the alternative to this would have been you're in a parade route and you're in the heart of the parade route, but you're also in a spot where you don't want to shoot the pyro musical show. Because, you know, after we shot show 1, we had manual pyro that Doug controlled, but then we also had the scripted stuff, which would have looked terrible if it was one going off on the route, because we hadn't gotten to show point 2 yet, where we had synchronized rooftop pyro to go along with what was on the float. So I had to make sure that we had a way of doing this but like, you want to be a showman too, and you don't want there to be any crazy interruptions.
Right.
Live entertainment is all about your ability to keep the show going. You know, it's just like when you're playing in a band on stage, and if you have something go wrong and something, you know, sucks, a drummer loses a stick or whatever, everybody just kind of like, you know, natively keeps going. You keep kind of playing you play within the context of a bar or two just to try to keep things going. You want to keep the crowd engaged. You want to keep the people engaged, and you want to find ways to creatively keep that show rolling so you don't have these distractions. Because if you're not distracted and you're into the show, then you win, right? Yeah. Because it's the distractions that break the show.
It's kind of like the podcast. When you're talking, I interrupt, ask a question. You're like, what were we talking about?
What were we talking about? Yeah.
Got it. Stop asking so many questions. Got it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty good with subliminal messages, Bo.
Yeah. Atta boy. You want to do some voicemails? I think we had a handful of voicemails about SMPTE.
Yeah. I'd like to hear what people have to say.
Me too.
Why don't you ever pick up the phone? I've got something to ask you. I was so reckless in your brain.
Guys, there's so much knowledge in here.
Pretty legs, ready legs, and I'll give it to me.
All right, first one's from Mikrid.
If you guys haven't touched on this yet tonight, what are the top 5 do's and don'ts for running SMPTE in your show?
Top 5.
I got one. I learned something. Don't run your SMPTE in mono.
Yeah, you should probably only run your SMPTE in mono. If you have a stereo SMPTE output file, you're breaking my brain.
Mono. Yeah, you want to have your music in mono and your SMPTE on the other channel.
I guess, another good one. If AJ were here, he would say, don't use SMPTE if you don't need to.
Yeah. I mean, it will make it simpler in some aspects, but you know what you know.
Complexities. There's a lot that goes into a SMPTE signal chain. It's a lot of added workflow.
It's more control too.
It's control.
Control freaks.
It's a total mechanism of control, but at the same time, the more you add to your signal chain, the more risks you have of things falling apart if you don't know how to troubleshoot them. So I guess
your top 5 go.
We probably hit on
just say all
that's
5
probably
of them
2
again.
of them.
Yep. Bleed.
Signal chain integrity is a huge one. Knowing how to troubleshoot signal chain. You have to know how to work backwards and forwards through your signal chain. You got to know the minute something goes wrong. I screwed up something at the lake, for example. It was over Dad and I's feed. It was during Dad's show feed that we started to get SMPTE timecode dropout. And it was all because of some super simple oversight that I face-palmed because I knew better, right? Mm-hmm. My audio interface, when you plug an audio interface into a computer, they're usually USB interfaces. The computer outputs all of your notification audio every time somebody sends you a DM or a Facebook message or all of this crap, that all of this stuff is being reproduced on the same stereo feed that you're running your show through. So we're going through Dad's freaking show, and it's 4th of July, and it's probably, like 9:30 or something like that. So, all of my friends back in Ohio, like they'd shot stuff already. So,
go.
Yeah, exactly. So people are sending text messages, and I've got a program on the computer that mirrors my phone. And because we were at Grandma's house, which is on the lake, I had a Wi-Fi connection. So I didn't, like an idiot, I never turned my Wi-Fi off, which I should have done. Like now I've got to check.
Wi-Fi off.
Yeah, right.
Check.
Now I got a checklist.
Wi-Fi off.
Yeah. Make sure that your signal integrity's good and clean, because all of this other stuff is going to fall under that. Create little checklists for yourself. If you're hearing SMPTE, but you're not hearing your audio, go back to the beginning. Go back to your source and check your output. Make sure that you're getting a stereo feed out of your output. Literally, buy a pair of crappy headphones, bust them in half. And if you've got an interface, I do that at a show. I have a pair of headphones that are busted in half, and I've got one that I can check music on that's coming out of the left feed, and then one that I can check SMPTE on that's coming out of the right feed. And if I hear anything differently out of that output, then I know that something's wrong at the source and I need to go back to the source. If it's fine in my headphones, then I know I have a problem upstream. And it's with either cabling, or it's with output volume, or it's with the firing system, or anything that's receiving timecode.
So the 5 things I heard is 1, make sure your Wi-Fi is off on your computer. Make sure you export in stereo. Make sure you have good integrity. Make sure you test your audio with headphones to ensure you have no bleed and your signal's good. And AJ said, make sure you plug in. Does that about cover it?
Yeah. Plug the SMPTE time. Plug the SMPTE feed in. Yeah, that's a good one.
That's pretty important to start the whole show.
Plug the SMPTE feed in. What else did he text? Make sure you have a SMPTE player backup. That's a good one too.
Oh,
you got a laptop and your laptop crashes, or make sure you got if you got your phone, put
make sure
file
your
on your phone.
computer's up to date and Wi-Fi is turned off just to be safe.
Sure.
Would you like to update Windows?
Oh God. All right, next one's from Firetech Curtis.
SMPTE. Since I've dealt with some of my own issues, I thought I would ask some questions and leave room in between each question so you can pause to answer them all.
It's one of those.
This may be 2 recordings, I don't know yet. First question. When troubleshooting, what are some best practices one should follow to help them navigate the timecode highway? Specifically speaking, when you encounter anomalies, how should you handle them?
Well, specifically, you kind of went over that just now. Some of the things are listening to it, testing it, and making sure you've fully separated your left channel and your right channel.
That understanding of the signal chain is so big. I mean, it's beyond big. That's the part that people will look at and be the most intimidated by, because it adds so many steps, and all of those steps are essentially they're essentially completely outside the realm of the stuff that we're familiar with, the firing system, the scripting software, all of that stuff, because it is different.
It's a huge unknown. I don't, like AJ said, if you don't need SMPTE, don't use it. It's a good system, but if you don't know how to do it, you are entering a realm of, you can mess something up, just like the first time you shot your show. You didn't know how to use it and you made that little mistake, but you also don't learn without trying.
Oh, that wasn't the first time. That was like the 6th time. So I would say that's a good point, is you can absolutely screw this stuff up if you're not cognizant of all of the really little things that you could potentially overlook. But your ability to know what happened, to be able to work forwards or backwards and identify exactly what went wrong, that's huge.
Yeah.
Question 2. You've tested everything to make sure it works. Now it's game day. When do you want to set up the signal chain or chains, and do you have a process that you go through to make sure everything is working correctly? Or when do you set up the signal chain?
I did, yeah. I do it as soon as I can. I mean, when you head to the table to do your continuity checks, when you're done doing your continuity checks, hopefully you've allocated enough time into your day to where you can do this, right? You're to a point, you did your continuity checks, and now it's time to set up the signal chain, because you got to test your audio at some point too. Whether you do it before or whether you do it after, it doesn't matter, so long as it's done and you've tested the integrity of the chain through to the firing system's ability to receive the output timecode, and the house audio system, if you're using it, its ability to get a clean signal from your interface.
And my suggestion is do it while there's daylight. It's much easier to find those cables.
You got an XLR.
When you're running across the field to grab that one cable,
what is this?
Those holes get you every time.
The hell is this hole?
Yeah, exactly.
Third question. If you are unable to access an external audio interface for your show, What tips and tricks would you suggest to others who have never done SMPTE before?
Okay. For example, you don't need an audio interface or one of those expensive ones I prefer it because I feel like I have more control over it. But I mean, I shot Sky Wars in 2020 from my phone, and I think a lot of guys do that. Doesn't Cobra's, what is it?
Cobra has an adapter, comes straight out of the R2 and goes in.
Pyrocast. AJ got it.
Yeah.
Pyrocast.
Never fear. Yeah. AJ is here.
He's here. He's here even when he's not here. Yeah, Pyrocast broadcasts audio from your phone. I know your phone can receive it, but I think it can also process it too. I mean, anything that plays your native file. So anything that manages playback, so long as you've destroyed the phone's ability to output any other kind of audio. I mean, when I shot Sky Wars, that phone was in airplane mode. All notifications were completely muted. Everything was off. That's the last thing that you want is somebody to send you a freaking text message in your notification to kill your music when you're shooting a show for 10,000 people.
You just need to have the adapters for that to work.
Exactly. Right. And I think
my suggestion is have an extra cable because one bad cable can be a bad show.
Yeah, totally. Yep. Yeah. I think I had, for that show, I had 2 of these USB-C to, I think they were just female
RCA, weren't they?
RCAs. And the rest of the signal chain on both sides was essentially that. An RCA male to RCA male that went from the adapter.
Yeah, I remember we were looking for all those things.
Yep.
Where's my connector at? Where's my barrel union?
Yep, exactly. You needed that little barrel union in between it because it's like, oh, they don't make that kind of cable, at least not one that's easily accessible. That's kind of another good point is if you can manage a clean signal chain with the least amount of adapters necessary, like that's big.
It's less failure points, but always have them just in case because you don't know what you're walking into.
Yeah, because there's a whole lot of thinking that goes into, oh, okay, well, hold on a second. This needs to go here and this needs to go here. And it'll save you a headache by the time you get there. Like that's a good one.
Last question in the next voicemail.
All right, moving on to part 2.
Hey guys, my final question is, I know we don't want to crowd the sound guy or the soundboard during the shows.
Sure we do.
So what sort of cable management do you incorporate to make sure everyone at the shooter's table has enough space? Or is this even something you typically think about?
Do you think about cable management?
No, I felt really bad. AJ had a really, really clean setup at Sky Wars. I did not. I was a total dick, and I didn't mean to be. I had so much crap at the table because I had the 2 remotes and I had the 2 tablets. And
you had your command center, didn't you?
I had my massive
suitcase
command center that was like, it's that homemade one. So it's like twice the size of the Cobra one.
The table's bowing.
Yeah, dude. If I would have been running that show on a laptop, then I would have absolutely been that dude at the table where the running joke would have been, well, this whole table belonged to you or what? Because it was like, I felt bad, but I mean, for the most part, like, you get enough space at these big 8-foot long tables and you're pretty good. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, cable management is, I don't really look at that as too much of an issue. What I will usually do is if I have like integral connection points and they're in a spot where people could potentially trip on them or step on them or something like that, then, maybe I'll tape them to the table or make a tie off at one of the tables or a zip tie or something like that. But just to create a slack point, or a point
gaff
in which,
tape is our new friend.
Like what's that?
Let's say gaff tape is our new friend.
Right. Yeah. All right. Is there any more to...
Thanks for the space to ask all these questions. I know it's a lot, but I also know that SMPTE Timecode is fairly new to the pyro musical landscape, and not everyone knows how to do it or how to do it properly. So I appreciate the time on creating an episode geared just towards timecode integration in your Pyro musical. Now, stop talking about it.
Oh, it's not time for that yet, but you're welcome.
Thanks for the questions, Curtis.
Yeah,
appreciate it, man.
Thanks, dude. Thanks. Especially like KCAP. KCAP does some cool stuff with multiple firing systems and things like that. But I mean, tying
and
together.
They have to use SMPTE with that too.
Yeah, you have to use SMPTE.
Cobra Tech and all that other little things they do, which is pretty cool.
But tying any of these systems together, you're going to use a SMPTE timecode feed, but it's the easiest way to go about it and easiest way to do it. I mean, all of your challenges are going to be on the opposite ends of that. And I guess if I were to give any piece of advice there, like Curtis and I were kind of talking about that, and I got to thinking about it. I'm like, you know what? If it were me in that situation, which I have not been in that situation yet. I mean, I've only ever tied together 2 Cobra systems, but if I were tying together other systems, and one, I didn't know how to design around one system, but I also didn't know how to shoot that other system. I would feel extremely reliant upon, information from whomever is the subject matter expert. One, just to create a design that works for that system's footprint and layout and all that kind of stuff. But also on show day, I mean, if you don't know the system, then you're kind of at the mercy of the people that do, right? You want to make sure that your resources are there and they're tuned in and they know how to set up their gear, put that thing in a state where it's ready to receive timecode and off to the races, All right, next one's
done.
Anonymous is my favorite kind.
Yes. When you have a Pyro musical with a lot of cues, like 13 minutes long, what is the best way to prevent SMPTE drift? I'm just wondering, asking for a friend.
SMPTE drift. What's the best way to prevent SMPTE drift?
On Pyro musical, that's about 13 minutes long.
Well, I had 13 minutes long, I guess.
Asking for a friend.
Yeah, I don't know.
How do you control that?
Well, what
is SMPTE drift?
Yeah. Any kind of audio file will mix down wave files, for example. It's like you mix down a wave file and you put it right next to a mixed down MP3 file of that exact same track. You'll experience drift and offset based on the codecs that were used to create the file. But I wonder if what they mean by the drift is the firing system's ability to react to the SMPTE timecode. Maybe that's what they're talking about, and broadcast it. Any kind of wireless system, like we talked about much earlier, is going to be subject to packets being transmitted across air. So everything needs to update, but typically all of that is done in such real-time fashion that, we as mere mortals can't even perceive it. But
yeah, SMPTE really shouldn't have that issue then.
Yeah. I think in like,
unless your computer is bad.
Yeah. You know what? I fell on my laptop at about the 3-minute mark and I had no idea that I hit the, now I'm playing back in 2x speed mode. You have drifted. Yeah. I've tried putting Reaper. I've tried speeding it up to see how the 18R2 reacts to the timecode. If it just played it faster, it completely loses it because it falls out of format. The chip can't read it anymore.
Yeah, if you got some kind of SMPTE drift, that's more of there's some kind of issue with something else, not something that could be fixed. It's a internal software or some kind of issue along that, right?
Yeah. I would think that if you're experiencing any kind of drift or something looks off, then I would go back to your original formatted file and check that. No, and if it's anything beyond that, and for the life of you just can't figure it out, then it could be something as like an incompatibility with a certain type of time code, like the chip that's inside your firing system isn't necessarily compatible. But I would think that the system wouldn't even be able to pick up on it at all if the IC that's inside the firing system that's supposed to be listening for time code picks it up and then just can't handle it. Because typically, if it can't handle it, it can't handle it. It won't even start.
I mean, that was the whole point of SMPTE, was to alleviate sync issues and speed change issues.
Yeah, right.
So you really shouldn't have that unless there's a major issue with your music file, your software, and that should all be evident prior to you actually shooting your show. If you didn't test your audio, shame on you.
Yeah, do dry runs, guys. Do your dry runs, and then the beauty of SMPTE when you're on site too, like when you do your sound check, just like we were talking about a couple questions ago, do that sound check, and then do your local test at your firing system too, because I'm quite sure that every single one of the firing systems, I know Cobra does, has a feature where you can pump time code into the system, and you're looking at the quality of the time code. Mm-hmm. And if you let that sucker run for either the entire duration of your show, or, I'm guilty of not letting it go the entire duration, but, you can bet your ass that to that point, I've done at least 2 or 3 dry runs to see and make sure that I've not dropped time code quality at all. And, like at that point, you just know.
I know AJ had recently tested the SMPTE on Cobra to some pretty high standards and was pushing its limits, and they actually did an update to ensure SMPTE was able to handle that. So, I mean, it's not something that's realistically should ever happen.
Yeah, well, and AJ got into the weeds too with Scott, and they were looking at like they were looking at like actual timestamp. Like, yeah, they were looking at actual UART data coming from the remote that was telling you, hey, here is where the remote is supposed to be, and here's where the SMPTE timecode is, and here's what kind of delta and time variance that they're keeping. And it was solid.
Yeah.
So, all right, last one's from
SMPTE.
Last one's from a guy with no sleeves.
No sleeves here. Hey, long time listener, long time thumb junkie at heart. You guys are talking about this SMPTE, simplicity, simplify thing. I don't know, some digital thing. I don't know, but in the thumb junkie world, it works great. Our hardware, the flares, they work great every time, and the hand voice signals that we use, they're very clear, and there really is no signal loss by doing that. It works great in the thumb junkie world. We just light it up. Oh, and big thumbs up to you guys. Great show. Love listening to your podcast. Keep up the good work, guys.
Thanks. Doug. AJ, you got to make sure next time you go to a show, just like over the radio, just start calling him Doug T.
Doug T.
Doug T. How do you guys run this show, Doug T?
Doug T.
Sleeves. Sleeves T.
We don't trip. We tie our shoestrings. No sleeves, no shoes. We can't trip over our shoestrings.
Oh, it's always special when people call. It makes me happy, Jamie.
It does.
Makes me happy. It's make you happy. And then.
It does. And then.
We got a new segment on the show. It's actually an update to an old segment, rather. It's kind of a facelift, as it were. We're super excited on this one. Cake Talk. Yummy. So the old Cake Talk is getting a facelift, and I am super excited. Den from Den Fireworks, you there, buddy?
If this is the facelift,
this is the facelift, my dude. You are
that plastic surgeon needs to get some money back. All right.
Well, the first Cake Talk was so.
Yeah. Well, so the way the Cake Talk worked on the other episodes is like we made full episodes out of Cake Talk. What's cool about this, you live and breathe fireworks, man. This is what you do in content creation.
And you break it down.
This is like a marriage made in heaven. We can just take Cake Talk and we'll make a segment out of it. And every few weeks, we'll call you and you plug us into some cool stuff that's out there. We'll break down some cakes. We'll talk about how they can be used in pyro musicals. You can kind of give spec overviews and who makes them. I thought this is something cool.
I am in. I think it sounds awesome. And I got a lot of ideas going around in my head right now.
I love it, dude. So what do you got for us for the Cake Talk Reimagined?
The first downgraded facelift. I am actually going back to the first cake that I sent up that I looked at and went, I don't even know what some of those effects are, but I love this and I need to find a way to work this in more. And it got me thinking more of what I could do for shows. And it got me to research how to cut apart a cake and fire it as a slice.
Nice.
I actually used this way back, and I used it again on my 300 subscriber special.
Okay.
So
Nice.
the video is not up to the current standards. I don't have the crowd camera. I didn't cut the top off. But what if there is a 75-shot, 500-gram cake out there? The first two rows are tails and horsetails.
What's the name of the cake?
What?
Well,
Who's going to tell us?
And then you go into cross-sets.
I see what you're doing here. You're really
Then-
milking this thing.
I'm milking this one.
What if there was a 75
AJ's
shot
gonna love
500?
this.
He's loving this reimagined segment. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
Tell
off.
me more.
No, we're good.
Tell
and
me
then,
more.
And then we get two more slices of horsetail.
So 2 horsetails, cross sets, and
Two
then 2 more
horsetails.
horsetails.
And then another cross set.
Okay.
And then 2 falling leaves.
What?
And then we end off in breaks.
I would personally want to know what the name of that cake was.
This is Customary Enforcer by Cutting Edge.
Customary Enforcer by Cutting Edge.
And why everyone who carries Cutting Edge does not have this cake, I do not know. I didn't even know what cross sets were called when this went off. Like, this was... I bought it on my first ever wholesale order through Superior Fireworks. They actually have a kind of clone of it now and stopped carrying Customary Enforcer. But this thing went off, and first is this beautiful fan of just fast horsetails going off. And I was like, that is beautiful. Like, you hear the lift, and then just that quiet burst of the horsetails.
Yeah.
The brocades, too.
Yeah.
Silver brocades?
They're goldenish.
Are they goldenish?
Yeah.
If you were
And
to
red
take
and
a
green
guess
cross
as to what you think the caliber is in these, I mean, it's 75 shots at 500 grams. You would think it's a smaller caliber, but when you shot it, I mean, what kind of scale?
Digging back into memory, I'm going to say they were like 1/8 of an inch bores for the horsetails and crossettes. And this is why I take the tops off of cakes now.
Yeah. So, like, in the confines of like a 1/4 pyro musical, would you classify this as a low mid performer in that vertical spectrum?
So, in the 300 subscriber special, I actually dropped a 2-inch NOAB behind it. Get Some, also by Cutting Edge.
Yeah.
And it broke like right at the halfway point of that 2-inch NOAB.
Oh, cool.
Was the horsetails and the crossettes.
Nice. It's a beautiful cake, man.
Oh, I love it. And it is so easy to make slices with it.
Yeah. Or even single shots.
Yes.
Those fallen leaves were wow.
Yes. And it's a consumer cake. I want to say it comes 2-1. I want to say the first time I got it was, I think it was 62 a case. And then I got it cheaper on the second run.
Huh.
And it is an awesome cake. And this one made me look and go, you know what? Instead of just lighting single cakes, I could really do stuff with this. And hey, is there a way to cut this apart?
Oh, dude, I can only imagine what that would look like if it was a little more fanned out, you know, taking that and then kind of reconfiguring, especially those horsetails, because that rising effect is so prominent.
Yeah. Yeah. And just break it down, make it a little bit wider, give yourself a bigger range and angle so they're not tripping over each other.
Yeah.
There is a ton you can do with this cake. A ton.
I love it, dude.
And that's why when you first talked about, hey, this is something we might do, this is the cake that jumped to my mind. I love this cake. I would love more people to see this cake. Because most of the times I bring it up, they're like, what? What cake that?
Yeah. I was a little tripped up at first when you said, what would you say if I told you there was a 75 shot, 500 gram cake? The first thing that I would have said is, okay, it's a tiny little zipper or something. I would have never pegged that as something that performs as a true, mid-level performer, or at least mid to mid-high even.
Especially an OG. I mean, this is going back before compounds were a big thing.
Yeah, and I actually put the short video of the 300 subscriber special, and that's two of them running in reverse. So while one's going right, the other one's going left. And then it's a 2-inch NOAB going up in the middle of it.
Nice, dude. So how would you use that personally in a musical?
I would break it up. I've broken it up a few times just for shows themselves.
Yeah.
Because, I'll do all the horsetails and I'll actually spread them out across the field more. So, we've got 4 rows right there.
Yeah.
So I'll fan them out onto 3 rows. I'll have one to play with later. And then I'll dump the crossettes off in the middle, but also changing the angles. So for those horsetails, we've got the left side sweeping into the right side sweeping into the left. And then I've actually mid-matched the row in the middle to give it like a fan look on the slice as well, that it comes out from the center and then fans on each side in.
Oh, yeah, totally. Absolutely, dude. And there's a really solid effect mix in here. And with the number of shots that you've got, it seems like a really good pickup to add a lot of value and a solid mix of effects if you're looking to break stuff up.
Yeah, and even running it as it is, that's still a great cake. And every time I've set it up, the crowd has always just been like, wow, as it's going up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear them there. They like it too.
Yeah.
Crowd favorite.
Love it, man. What else you got for it?
So the second one, I actually went with something a little newer that I have done. And Hammer and Anvil, I picked up, and they're probably going to be featured a lot on this because I am loving a lot of their cakes that they did.
Oh, they have such good stuff.
They really do. I just sent up a bunch more last weekend that I am loving as well. But one I wanted to call out is their Ultramine series. So it comes 4-4 to the case. They're all 9-shot cakes, but it's 4 different sets of mine cakes. They're 30 millimeter bore.
Okay, so it's an assortment.
Yep, it's an assortment that comes 4-4. And there's one that is red, white, and blue. There's one brocade with white, green. There's one red, green, blue with crackling. And for me, a straight silver crackling with a delayed crackle.
Yeah.
And because they're Hammer and Anvil, they all have that pyro blueprint on them.
Oh, yeah.
So, like the red, white, and blue one, it goes white mine to red up higher for a shot, then it's the white mine with blue, then red, so it's the double reds, single blue. Yeah. But cutting 9 of these out for a cake is cheaper than getting a lot of single shots usually.
Oh, I bet.
They're nice and full still, and for the people who can't get Proline yet, because they haven't passed their cert, or they just can't get any around them, like New Hampshire, we've got no Proline. I've got to ship everything in. This gives you 9 great mines on each one. Yeah.
I would say they're in the 30 to 40 category.
Yep.
Bushiness.
Yeah, they are 30 millimeter bores on it.
That's awesome.
And they're shorter. The cake itself is still lower. And they look great. That crackle has a really nice hit to it as well when you get to those ones.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I see it.
And these are 200 grams?
Those are 200-gram cakes.
Yeah, that Pyro blueprint that they print on there is so useful.
Oh,
It's got a nice...
For a new user.
Yeah, and it seems like they all have consistency as far as height, and the different layers and burn times seem really good. Like it's got just a nice, thick mortar cone width on it.
Their quality control is definitely up there for sure.
Yeah, I still have a good amount of stuff in the stash that I picked up that I need to send up still, but everything I have done by them has been really good quality, beautiful colors, and that Pyro blueprint is, I mean, even their fountains have the Pyro blueprint.
It's so helpful, man.
Yeah.
It's so helpful. I mean, I remember
everything is labeled, everything is marked. It's all there.
Oh, you go back to remembering the days where, they were really trying to sell the effects by just giving them really outlandish kinds of names and descriptions, and then you see the effect, and then it's essentially it's not really what it is. It's not kind of adhering to that standardized
VDL.
Yeah, VDL vocabulary, I guess, of what effects do. So like to people that kind of know better, you're used to identifying things the way that they're supposed to be identified. And then you have no idea what it means when they just go nuts on like, this is a vibrant lizard green.
Spidering
just
to
means
a
it's
spinning
green.
tail.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I like that, man. I think that's a solid cake.
Yeah, I thought it would be a good ad for those who want the mines but don't have the access, or even just some cheaper mines as well if you don't mind to cut stuff apart.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Well, yeah,
What you did there. I see what you did there.
Thank you, man. Thank you
Beautiful
for
cakes, man.
taking the paddles of the what do you call those things? The things that hang in the hospital. It's a cake talk.
Oh, the defibrillator?
There you go. That one.
Clear!
Only you can prevent pyro defibrillation.
Oh, man. Yeah.
That one I might be able to get away with,
Den from Den Fireworks. Go check him out on YouTube. Den Fireworks. I'm going to take the links from the videos, and just like we had playlists on YouTube before, we'll do the same thing. I'm going to put a playlist together, only it's going to link you guys straight to Den's channel, and then you guys can go check out the videos. And I'm excited.
I'm excited too, man. I appreciate the chance to just gush more about all the fun stuff I've been sending up. And I think there's more stuff coming too.
As far as I'm concerned, you're a subject matter expert. You got the lifeline to this kind of stuff.
Oof, I'm the SME.
Wow. I need you to come to my house and grab a cake. Grab all the cakes you want out of my shed and demo them for me.
Do not tempt me, all right?
Hey, come on down, brother.
All right, Den, thanks, man. And just like that, and then he's gone.
And then he's gone.
And then he's
sad.
gone. That was awesome. I really, I'm looking forward to the new Cake Talks.
I'm sad. I can't wait for the next Cake Talk.
I know. It'll be good. I had to see, and this is exactly why. I had no idea. What was that first one? The, I had the YouTube video pulled up. It was Enforcer something, wasn't it? What was it?
Yeah, 75 shot, 500 gram.
Customary Enforcer.
Yeah, I mean, the effects are unique, especially for as old as that cake is.
Yeah.
They were pretty unique for that time, especially be to combine like that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Cutting Edge makes good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. This one's long enough, I think. We ain't got any news. No news this week. What else? I think that's it. We did Voicemail and cake talk. We done.
It's about time to stop talking about it.
It's time to stop talking about it. AJ, get better. Go have the doctor fix you.
Love you, AJ.
Anal probe.